Thank you for inviting me to this very first Afterdark chapel. What a privilege and what an honor it is. I love new semesters and new beginnings, and this is awesome. And thank you for worship, you guys. That was an amazing song, and there's so much there. It is so cool to come together and to be with the Lord in times like this, and to be able to spend a little bit of time visiting. I love that song too, where it talks about He knows our name. Isn't that amazing? He knows our name, and He sees every tear that falls. What's also amazing, not only does He see every tear that falls, He takes them and He captures them and He puts them in a bottle. Do you know the psalmist says He takes every tear, He doesn't just see it, He collects each of our tears, each tear in a bottle. To me, that's just an amazing thing. And that every time I hear that song, it reminds me of a God who knows us intimately and personally and cares for us. By the way, I love that. I love times where we get to come together and worship, and I love places like this where we get to come and talk and visit and hang out and hear what God is doing in each of our lives and what is happening for the opportunity that we have to see each other and walk and uphold one another. What a great thing. I remember my first semester in my first year in college. I was at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and Vegas. And I probably changed my major like 3 times that year because I wanted to do everything. I was going to be a professional baseball player. That one didn't work out very well. I was going to be a lawyer. That one didn't work out very well either. And then I just decided, you know what? I'm just going to wait and be undecided. I'm going to just take classes. And I loved that. I loved new beginnings. There's something about it. I also remember some experiences in college that reminded me whenever I get up and talk to students what happened to me in one of my very first classes. I was up there and it was a psychology class, and the professor basically volunteered me to come up and to get hooked up to this machine. And it was a machine that basically was a lie detector. And so really what it did was it would just simply allowed, these noises and sounds and lights. And so I get hooked up to this machine, and he says, all right, let's see how it works. And so it looked kind of like this, by the way. This new beginning for me was a strange moment because I didn't know anybody. And as I stood up there, I remember thinking, it's my first year in college. Here I am. I'm up in front of everybody, and this is kind of what it looked like. And so I sat there, and he said, now let's just see if we can get a reaction out of you. And so he started to attempt to make this machine move, and really what it really was just a measure of skin responses. And so if you get really nervous, your skin sweats, and that machine picks it up, and it makes a very loud noise, like an alarm. And so I sat up there in front of class, and he said, all right, I got the grade book up here, and let's just see how well you're doing in class. And he goes, wow, it looks like you got a couple of very bad grades. In fact, you're failing my class. And the sound, bzzz, nothing. I was really calm and collected and cool. I'm like, yeah, no, I'm doing fine in your class. And so it was sitting there, and he kept saying, okay, let's try something else. He tried something else I can't remember. And then he started to not play very nice. He pointed to a girl about halfway back named Melissa. And he said, Melissa, would you mind coming up here? And all of a sudden you hear, boo. And he said, would you mind giving Chris, and he didn't even have to get the words out, a kiss. And that thing, woo! Like that. It sounded like a fire alarm in one of the dorms out here. The lights were flashing and red. I honestly don't know who was redder, that machine or me or poor Melissa. She was like, okay. I'm like, don't you come up here and kiss me anything. What ends up happening, and when we start to think about these things, I have a lot that I want to share with you about what I had learned and what I hope is an opportunity for you to take advantage of some cool things. Community is very powerful out here. So let me do this. As we're praying and thinking about this night and what God will do and bring, let's just take a moment and pray. So Father, as we come together tonight, I just pray that you are here and real and relevant, and that you are not only here as our Father, but as our King and our Lord, that you show us who you are, an amazing thing, that you know our name. You see every tear and you collect every tear. Help us to see your powerful presence tonight. Thank you for calling us your children. We give this to you tonight in Jesus' name. Amen. So as I think about new beginnings, one of the things that I do is I often pray before a semester. I'll pray for this room oftentimes if I'm teaching in it, and I'll pray for you. I'll oftentimes try and grab your names and pray for them individually if I'm meeting with you or if I see you. And I think one of the cool things that we get to do is do something that's pretty powerful. We get to call in the Father of all of us, the creator of this universe, and invite him in. What an amazing opportunity. I love what the writer of Isaiah 43, 18 and 19 said. This is what I sometimes will pray at the beginning of a new year. I just pray what he said. Do not call to mind the former things or ponder the things of the past. He says, behold, I will do something new. Even now it will spring forth. I will even make rivers in the desert, and I will make roadway in the wilderness. Some of you are in a wilderness. Sometimes we're surrounded by so much. There's a whole lot there, and it's hard to see which way to go. We have so many things that we like, so many things we want to do. And college is a time for us to kind of explore and understand and to see where he's leading us, where our calling is taking us. And sometimes that wilderness can get overwhelming. And some of you are in a desert. Some of you are struggling a little bit with this notion of being dry, being maybe not filled like you used to be, and feeling like these tears are coming at a more rapid rate than they ever have before. No wonder we're dry. What does it mean then when we take this? So that's what I pray. I pray that each of us will understand and see more about what it means to walk with him, to know him, and to see something new. This word that stands out for me is now it will spring forth. Will you not be aware of it? I love this because this thing that we were talking about earlier in that song is that God seems to be aware. He knows my name. This is a powerful phrase. Do you know it shows up in Scripture all over the place, this idea of aware? Awareness is one of the critical words, I believe, that we have in relationship with our Father. And it's meant so much to me to know that he is simply, at the end of the day, aware of me. What a cool thought. He knows me. He is so aware that this word shows up in a variety of places. Think about times, when do you notice that God is aware that seems surprising to you? What are some passages or some concepts in which you go, he knows that? He's there? Do you know people were reasoning? I remember just reading in Mark where he looked at the reasoning, people that was going on in their minds and said, I know what you were reasoning about. That's freaky. It's just amazing that he cares so much. When we hear the phrase like, he knows every hair on our head. He knows every thought, just like a sparrow. No, not a sparrow dies without him knowing. That just brings home something pretty powerful. Sometimes you can feel lost. Sometimes you could feel in the wilderness, and sometimes you could feel in this desert. And he doesn't forget. He knows you deeply, powerfully, all things, and nothing surprises him. I love this idea. I was just reading a couple of different passages, and I kept thinking, what do I notice and pay attention to? When I was in college, I don't know, what are y'all paying attention to? Well, what is it that grabs you? I know people say, oh, we're surrounded by so much technology and we have a hard time concentrating and paying attention. I think it's always been like that. I think back then when I was in college, I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't even know I wish I would have known what cell phones were. I would have invented it. But we didn't know, but we were still surrounded, all kinds of things. A lot of us were in the wilderness, and we just simply were unable at times to kind of pay attention to that which was important. And I wished I had known that. You see, community requires something about attention. Community requires that we look around and think about and pay attention to what goes on. What do we pay attention to, and what do we notice? I want to just kind of challenge us with just a couple of thoughts. I think about not only God holding and paying attention to us, it starts in the Old Testament and it goes throughout. I've already given you a psalm and some other places. God saw the sons of Israel and God took notice of them. This hasn't changed. from eternity, and it will not change. He knows us. He knows us intimately and thoroughly. I remember the dinner guests stood out in Luke. That's where I'm doing my quiet times this past week, has been in Luke 14, and I've just simply been paying attention to something that struck me. But the word awareness, and he noticed, and he's aware of us, stood out to me. And it stood out because of this. In verse 7, he says, he noticed how they had been picking out seats. I think that's the funniest little thing I've seen. He noticed people picking where they were going to sit. Of all the things for Jesus, who is now in Luke 14, I mean, he's not far from heading off to Calvary. He's not far from taking that step to go down from Jericho to Jerusalem. And he notices when he's visiting with people where they were picking their seats to sit. And I think to myself, what in the world why would that draw his attention? Because you see, I think there's something about Jesus' noticing us, just like we are called to it. I think we are sometimes called, and thank you for your prayer and what you talked about up here about how God knows us and we want to be understood and heard by others. I think that what this does is it reveals something about the people's heart. And that's why he noticed where they were picking and choosing where to sit. He noticed because as they chose to sit in a certain location, it revealed something deeper. It's just our actions reveal things about our hearts. And he said, you are choosing something to be honored by men. You're choosing to do something to be honored by men. And what I want you to do instead is to take the last seat. Now that's just, to me, it just is amazing that he would notice something like that. Mark 8:17, do you not see or understand? He said this to his disciples after a number of times and the people around. Do you have a hardened heart? Having eyes, do you not see? And having ears, do you not hear? What I wonder about and what I hope is, what are we paying attention to? And so just as we think about community, I think one of the key things is, what am I looking for? So I want to just give us a couple of ideas and what I think would be 3 key steps for us as when it comes to this idea of starting something new and what does it mean to be in community. I think the first thing is to master the art of awareness. I think if you do this well in college, I think you will begin to find some ways in which God shows up in some powerful ways. Master the art of awareness. What does it mean to know that he is here? Is God in this room? Has he ever left this room? Now, maybe if we're not around, but this is an amazing campus. Even if this room is empty, I believe God is still inhabiting places. He is still present. I think the problem is not whether or not God is here right now. It's the fact that I'm not really noticing him. You see, sometimes I'm just so wrapped up in my own thoughts, and sometimes I get so distracted, and sometimes I get so worried and so fearful and so anxious that I think, how long has it been since I've thought about his presence? How long is it before I think about him the next time? I think one of the coolest things we can do, and one of the most amazing things we can ever do, is master this art of being aware. I think one of the first questions we have to ask is this: am I aware right now that he's present? What are signs that he's here? I don't think he's ever left, and I believe he is here. I believe some people just have a clearer and better sense of knowing him. I think they kind of figure it out, and they walk that way, and they talk that way, and they're constantly with him. I love verses that says he's with us and that he's always present. I don't know what some of y'all have as some of your favorite ones. Mine, Matthew 28:20, I am with you always. Nothing clearer than that. He's always here. He has never left. There are times when I just have felt, I remember thinking, by the way, I didn't know Jesus in college the first 2 years, and ultimately I heard the gospel from somebody at University of Northern Colorado in the registration line. Guy tapped me on the shoulder and asked me, he said, hey, do you want to hear answer a couple of questions for me? And I did. I answered these questions. And in light of that, he figured out I wasn't a Christian, and so he came up to my dorm room because I asked him to, and I heard the gospel for the first time. But what I still know is what happened after that, when I felt the presence of others. First of all, things like this chapel, I would have loved to have done this. Didn't know it existed. I didn't know something like this was there. To see you guys here is so encouraging. To hear you singing as college students, oh, there are people at secular universities right now, man, who would just give anything to be right in one of these seats. I was at Berkeley about 6 months ago, me and another professor, Tim Muehlhoff, and we were talking to a group about how to do communication and how to do relationships well at Berkeley. And as we were there, we just told them a story, and we talked, and there were students who came up. And I remember this one particular student came up, and she just wanted what you have right here. She heard us talking, and she had tears in her eyes, and she said, 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, I had to make a decision what school to go to. And I had to choose between Biola University and Berkeley. And I really, really wanted to go to Biola, but I felt like God was calling me to Berkeley. And you know what? I'm really glad I'm here, and I love this experience. But after tonight, I realize I may have missed something powerful. It's all because we did is we just simply brought what it meant to have a worldview that's Christian, what it meant to understand relationships from that perspective. And then we spoke the next night to a bunch of Christians there, and we encouraged them and gave them hope and told them about what we do here. And it just challenged her. She's so grateful. And she says and she desires and needs our prayers. Because you see, we don't ever want to take for granted that He's present here. Don't ever forget that. He never leaves us. There are so many schools and so many places that want what we have tonight. And they don't have it. Let's keep that in mind. I love this. I am continually with you. This is the psalmist talking to God, and God basically responds in kind. Or Isaiah, don't fear, I'm with you. Don't anxiously look about you, for I am your God. And then he goes on and says, who takes hold of your right hand and says to you, don't fear, I will help you. Hand holding is amazing. So am I aware of His presence? He is always here and ever present. So here's something to practice. Here's what helped me, and here's what I kind of work with all the time, and here's what I still struggle with at different times. But I think one of our challenges here is to find that place, to not take things for granted, and to find that place where you can meet Him. Find that place where you can meet Him. Maybe it's on campus. Maybe it's where you live at home. Maybe there's a nearby park. Maybe there's someplace, but call it holy, call it sacred, and meet Him there. Claim that place and surround that place with your prayers and say, God, this is where I'm meeting you, and help me to do this well. Help me to be here because I know you're here and I know you show up. Help me to be there. That's why you pray in Psalm 139, search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxious thoughts. Be there with Him. So that's what I would suggest. Find that place. I don't know what it's like for you at Biola. I think there's all kinds of places that seem holy to me. Have you found that places that you're like, I think God is here? It feels more like He's around. I can tell you where I see that. I feel God in certain places like that campus, and I'm like, this is awesome. The cafeteria. No, not really. That's usually when I'm hungry. But when our relationship with God is healthy, then our other relationships are healthy. That's it. When our relationship with God is healthy, our other relationships tend to be healthy. What an amazing thing we have. So that's something to practice when we talk about being the mastering the art of our awareness, being attentive, being mindful. And then not only am I aware of His presence, am I really aware of the others around me? You see, I think when you prayed the idea of you want people to understand you and to know you and to sense, and you sometimes feel disappointed if somebody doesn't, this is that idea. Do people really get me? But really, another question is, am I really aware of other people around me? You know, I look around here sometimes and I see some hurt and some pain. I see awesome things. I see good people. I see people who love Jesus and want to walk with the Lord. But I also see some things, maybe because of what I do for a living, but I see some people in pain. And it worries me. You know, I think one of the challenges that we all have is something we told our kids all along. We've always told them this phrase: it's better to be interested than interesting. You ever heard that before? Do you know it's better to be interested than interesting? Do you know so many times what I felt like in college, what I was trying to do? I kept trying to impress people. I kept trying to be interesting. And I kept trying to be like, ooh, look at me, I'm interesting, and I do this, and I try this. And it becomes very self-focused. I want to be interesting to people. I want them to think I'm interesting. And we learned one day that maybe it's a little bit better. It took a little bit of time. It's better to be interested than interesting. It's better to find out about somebody. It's better to spend some time asking and talking to them. What a cool philosophy in life to be interested, not interesting. I think what it does is it begins to take off the focus from us, which is so easy to hold on to. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about why this focus is so hard and so insidious and pulls us away from the presence of God and ultimately from community when we begin to become too self-conscious, too self-focused, too interesting, and not interested. And I think this idea of being self-conscious is a really important one. It's known as the spotlight effect in my discipline. And basically it means most people believe that a spotlight is on them more often than it really is. It's fascinating. The spotlight effect. People tend to overestimate the number of people who look at them and worry about them and think about them. They misattribute a lot of other people as them paying attention to them, and so therefore they become highly self-conscious. And I believe it detracts away from community when we begin to avoid or not think about or get worried and not really being able to pay attention to somebody else. And then just another kind of thing, being aware of others around me, be aware. Keep those friends who bring you closer to God. I wished I had known this. There was a good friend of mine in college. We were roommates. His name was Terry. And Terry and I, we did a lot together. We went skiing one time, and we were going in Colorado, growing up there, and we skied a lot. And I remember going around this corner one day, and we were just flying going through trees. We were really out of bounds and shouldn't have been doing this. And the next thing you know, he's following me, and then I'm following him. Well, I happened to be in the lead this time, and so it's pretty deep snow, and all of a sudden we just go, and where we come around a corner and pick up speed, and the next, I'm in midair. I'm just I'm just going off the side of a cliff. And it just came out of nowhere. And I'm just, and I remember it hit so hard, it hurt so bad. And I remember yelling, Terry, no, and I hear, and he lands right next to me, and he's just like, we're just sitting there. We can't move. My thumbs, I think they're broken, and my ankles. And he's like, Chris, I can't move, man. I'm telling you the story because Terry's an amazing guy, and I loved him, and I needed to keep him close. He called me on things. But I messed up this day because I took us off a cliff. And he got up, and he went like this, and I said, Terry, I was maybe a little hyperbole, Terry, we're going to die, man. We got to get out of here. There's nobody here. And he's like, oh my gosh, we're going to die. And I'm like, well, I don't know if we're really going to die. I just kind of say that, but we got to get up. And he picked his leg up, and he went like that. And I went, oh, don't stand up, don't stand up. His leg was like severed. I love Terry, but at that time, I'm thinking, I'm going to have to leave you because I'm going to live here, pal. I'm so sorry. You've been a good roommate. I really valued everything about you. I saw Terry, by the way, 8 years later. And here comes a guy walking in the airport towards me and my wife, and he's walking with a limp. I know. And I said, Lisa, I'm about to introduce you to my roommate, Terry. She goes, oh. And he goes, hi, Chris, how you doing? I said, oh, I'm doing good. How are you? Anyway, I don't know why I'm telling you the story. Keep him close. Keep people that hold you accountable, and don't take him off a cliff, all right? Keep him nice and near, and don't leave him behind. One more thing, this is an important one. This is a really big one for me, for all of you. When I look out there, I hear and I talk to a lot of people, especially some of the newer ones that are here. Be aware of those who may be lonely. Be aware of those who are on the outside. If you want to do anything powerful today, if you want to make your college experience amazing, you want to have a great community, pay attention to somebody around you that's lonely, that's on the outside. My first year at University of Nevada, Las Vegas, I didn't know a single person. I moved away from Colorado. I was an athlete. Now I'm playing or trying to play at a team that I could never play for. They were that good. And I was cut loose. I was lonely. And I just simply nobody reached out. I wasn't a Christian and nobody reached out. It was really hard. I'll never forget that. Pay attention. There's people around us in this room that are feeling homesick tonight. We reach out in community for them. So pay attention and be aware. So how do we do this? The best way to practice this, I think it's to be quick to listen and slow to speak. If you want to master the art of awareness, do this. Be quick to listen and slow to speak. Practice perspective taking. That's my second point. Learn to see things from somebody else's perspective. This is Philippians. You've heard this verse so many times. Do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind, what are we supposed to do? With humility of mind, we regard one another as more important than ourselves. We don't look out for our own personal interest, but also for the interest of others. I think this idea of seeing something from another person's perspective is a challenge for college students. It was a challenge for me, and I learned, man, I see things messed up sometimes. I remember just the awesomeness of being like, oh my gosh, I never thought about that before. Or this was new, and I think it's a challenge for each of us. If we want to have good community, practice taking perspectives of somebody else. Learn what it means. Put yourself in their shoes. But do this. Be careful that when you interpret the actions of others, be aware of your own issues. Be aware of your own filters. You see, sometimes I see your behavior and I interpret it through what I see. I've told some of you this story before in class. If you remember it, we took a couple of people and we wanted them to find out what it was like and did they have certain filters and see other people that way. And so they brought in a makeup artist and they brought people in and they put a scar on their face and asked them to go walk around in public and see what people were like when they saw and noticed this very ugly scar on their face. And they put them in front of a mirror and they saw it and the people went, oh, I got to go out there? Yeah, why don't you go out there and talk to people and see what it's like now? Do people treat you differently? And almost every person came back, around 85% of the people came back and said this, yeah, people treated me differently. They were colder, more distant. They seemed to kind of like back away from me. They weren't as friendly before. I didn't feel as accepted. And the twist is, not a single person was actually wearing a scar. I'll say it again. Nobody actually walked out with the scar. 85% of people came back saying people were colder and more distant. You see, because right before they walked out of the room, the makeup artist said, hold on here. The glue is coming off. Let me fix the scar, put some glue on there. And they removed it without them knowing it. They walked out with their normal face. And they felt people were colder and more distant. What does that mean? That's pretty powerful. Do we sometimes see people through a scar that's really not there, or a scar that's real to us, and we see and interpret people behavior based on that? You see, taking somebody else's perspective is really hard to do, but it's really important, isn't it? And we have to be very cautious and very careful when we do this. I think it's an amazing study that shows how quick we are to judge other people, or sometimes see things what we want to see and expect to see. That's the scar studies. So here's something to consider. What do I believe about this person? And then working on thinking and assuming the best. They are children of God. I want to walk with them and know them. Well, the last point as we finish up tonight is take the initiative to build community. I just think that's so important. I'll just tell you, I really wished I could have done this better. There are just some people I should have connected with, and I wish I could have connected more, and I kind of regret at times not taking as much initiative. I was too easy just to kind of stay back. But be willing to step outside your comfort zone. I was challenged to do this, and I remember a person said, you need to figure out, do something different. Hey, what are you not good at? And I remember saying, I don't know, I don't know anything about music. And he goes, then you're going to take a piano class. So I did. I took a piano class for the musically challenged. And it was a piano, and I walked in the first day, and the guy goes, this is a piano. And I went, awesome, this is my class, man. If you're gonna start that way, I'm gonna start this way. Do something outside your comfort zone and reach out to people that you might not normally want to hang out with or reach out to. You might be surprised. Be willing to take that first step for community. Reach out. Go outside your comfort zone. What an amazing opportunity we have in a place like this to see other fellow believers and come alongside them and take that risk. So in summary, as we start a new school year, ask ourselves these questions. Am I aware of his presence? Am I aware of others around me? Am I quick to listen and slow to speak? Do I practice perspective taking? And am I stepping outside my comfort zone? If so, man, we can pray this prayer. Behold, I will do something new, he says. Now it will spring forth. Will you not be aware of it? I will even make a roadway in the wilderness and rivers in the desert.
Biola University prepares Christians to think biblically about everything, from science to business to education and the arts. Learn more at biola.edu.